Hi, this is Danielle Uchitelle at Gallery Systems, and today we're going to be looking at some of the new functionality in the TMS Thesaurus Manager. There are so many new things to demonstrate in the Thesaurus Manager that we've divided the webinar into two presentations. Today is part 1, and part 2 will be broadcast on Wednesday, October 21st. So mark your calendar. We will be sending out notification about that, but just to give you advance notice, Wednesday, October 21st. Our presenter today is Jeri Moxley, Client Services Specialist at Gallery Systems. Jeri's association with Gallery Systems stretches back 15 years, when she began working in our Berkeley office. Around that same time, I was starting a new position at the Guggenheim Museum. I was subsequently able to hire Jeri at the Guggenheim, where we worked together most productively for a number of years. Eventually, I moved on to working for Gallery Systems, and Jeri moved on to the Museum of Modern Art. A few years after that, I was able again to hire Jeri back to Gallery Systems, where her expertise has been an invaluable asset to me and to TMS clients in general. So please join me now in our webinar presentation of the TMS Thesaurus Manager. As the presentation proceeds, feel free to ask questions by typing into the question box in your GoToWebinar control panel, which is probably in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. I'll leave time at the end of the webinar to respond to as many questions as we can. So I'm going to pass the screen control over to Jeri now. Okay, Jeri, go ahead.
Okay. Good morning. So I am going to show you some features of the Thesaurus Manager today and talk to you a little bit about the use of the Thesaurus in TMS. So the Thesaurus is a controlled vocabulary manager. I'm going to show you, first of all, how this is available in a browser as well as in the application itself. So I'm going to start with an overview of the Thesaurus screen. The concepts are organized in folders on the left-hand side of the screen. You see that this is a browser here with the address of the Thesaurus for my database. And in the list of concepts, you see that we have the Art and Architecture Thesaurus as well as the Thesaurus of Geographic Names. These are Getty thesauri that are delivered with a standard implementation of TMS. I also have some local authorities that I've added to this database organized under the concepts list. On the right-hand side, you can see that there are 3 panels. The preferred lexical labels are at the top. In the middle section are alternative lexical labels, alternate terms for that concept. And at the bottom, there is a hierarchy display, which is the path to the concept in the Thesaurus. I'm going to switch to my application version of the Thesaurus. And let me switch over here. All right. On the left-hand side of my screen now, I have the Thesaurus Manager, and on the right, I have my TMS data entry screen for an object. I'm going to begin by searching for a concept, and then I'll give you a little bit more of a tour of the Thesaurus Manager. At the top of the screen, there is a Find Concept button, and I'm going to click that. And on the right-hand side, I get my search screen. I'm going to search with, I would like to search only within the Art and Architecture Thesaurus. I've added other vocabularies to this Thesaurus Manager, but to limit my search, I can use this checkbox on the right. it asks to search for terms within the selected branch only. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick little search on paintings in the Getty's Art and Architecture Thesaurus. When I click Find Now, on the right-hand side, my search results are displayed below the search options. For paintings, you see that for this exact equals to search, I have 3 results in the AAT: a descriptor, a related term, and a Library of Congress subject heading link. In the Getty's terminology, descriptor is the preferred lexical label. I'm going to select this on the right-hand side, and there's a button labeled Locate Concept. When I locate concept, it will find that label, paintings, in the structure on the left. Okay, I'm going to close my Find Concept just by clicking that button, and this will bring us to a larger screen to look at the results. So a concept can have more than one preferred lexical label, as you see with paintings here. We have the English paintings and the French peinture. In the Thesaurus Manager, you can have multiple preferred lexical labels, but only one per language. So I could have a Spanish equivalent, an Italian equivalent, and so forth. Under alternative lexical labels, I can have as many as I'd like or need, and they can be in the same language or multiple languages. At the lower part of the screen, we have scope notes and history notes for any concept in the Thesaurus Manager. A scope note is a definition and a guide to use for that concept. These scope notes may be included in reports from your database, and they could actually be published to your website as a shortcut for getting content about your vocabulary online. History notes give you a little bit of tracking about the development of your controlled vocabulary, and that field also could be repurposed if you had other needs for a website or internally. The path that's displayed below the scope note and history note is a hierarchy view, but it's also a navigation. So in this path, I could choose Visual Works, and when I select it, I'm navigating to Visual Works in the structure. I'm going to go back to Find Concept now. And at this point, if I search within the selected branch, I'm looking not just within the AAT, but because I'm on Visual Works, I'm selecting that as my search location. So if I search for drawings now, I'll do another find, and it locates drawings within the Visual Works branch. Okay. Just to the right of that Find Concept button, you have a Locate Catalog Term Type. If I click this button, this is a shortcut to managing your vocabulary in the Thesaurus for configured attributes and geographical cross-references and statuses in your database. In the Catalog Term Type selector, the first column is labeled Type. The types are your attribute types and your geography cross-reference types. So it's something like a field definition for the vocabulary that you're linking for your cataloging. The second column is associated concepts. Under associated concepts, you have an indication of the thesaurus branch where it's coming from. This is actually the root for that type that's configured in your TMS database. The table indicates where in TMS you would find this attribute type. Most of these values are modules. Sometimes it's a screen within a module. And then the last column tells you what kind of control because as many of you know, in objects, for example, you have attributes, but you also have geography cross-references. These columns are also sortable, so if I click on the column header, this will help me to find what I'm looking for. I am going to go to the style period attribute type in objects, and this tells me that my TMS administrator has configured this attribute type to look only at the vocabulary stored under the styles and periods facets. I can locate this concept, and just like I showed you with the find concept, it navigates to that point in the structure. Okay. I am going to switch over to TMS and look at adding terms from the Thesaurus Manager to the museum system. This is an object record for a relief that my staff has done some research on, and they have determined that this relief is from the 6th dynasty. And I, in my museum, have a standard to enter this information under the attributes control here at the front tab. So in my Thesaurus Manager, I am going to search for the 6th dynasty. I'm going to click on Find Concept. I'm going to search within the Styles and Periods facet because that is what my attribute control is configured to. Right. I'm having a little keyboard issue. All right, my keyboard is not agreeing with me, so I'll go old school and drill on the left. Okay, under the styles and periods, let's see. Actually, it's too much drilling. Let me see if I can jigger this keyboard into working. Try my other one. All right, brief intermission. Okay, I am looking for the 6th dynasty. And I'm going to locate the concept. When you're adding your vocabulary to your objects in TMS, what I'm showing you now is actually just one option for adding terms. Many of you will know already that you have a workflow where you can click the Add button under the attribute and search for the term that you're adding. I just want to make sure that if you are not aware already, that you know that you can also drag and drop a term from the thesaurus onto your data entry screen, and this can be a time saver. So I've selected the attribute type. Notice that it gave me options. The options that it presents are all of the options in your attributes that are configured for that branch of the thesaurus. If I have an attribute type that's configured for geography, then it won't present as an option for something coming from the style and period facet of the AAT. Okay, so this is a single entry for this particular object. Now, you also have options in TMS to tag multiple objects with your vocabulary at the same time. So I'm going to do a quick search in TMS for anything made of rock, any kind of rock. So this is something that's made of limestone, and I'm just going to do a quick search, which will also demonstrate the searching power of the vocabularies. So I'm going to query my database, and I'm going to search on the medium field. This is a free text field. It is indexed, and it is a field that is searchable with the assistance of the thesaurus. So I will search on rock, and I'm including thesaurus equivalents as well as narrower terms. So the equivalents are alternatives, preferred labels in other languages, and the narrower terms are all of those things in the structure of the thesaurus beneath the point where I'm searching. So I'm going to click next and next again. So I found 64 objects. I'm going to switch over to my list view in TMS, and I'm going to sort by medium. And this will show you the various kinds of things that are under the rock branch of the AAT that were found. The first one here is basalt after my search, and I'll switch this over to data entry now. Okay, so this first object in my sorted results is basalt. At this point, if I had found a set of objects that all should be linked to the same controlled term in my vocabulary, I have the option of linking one and then copying it to the rest of the objects. This time, rather than doing my search in the thesaurus, I'm going to use my add button here. So I will click add, and I'm going to search on materials here as my attribute type. And I'm just going to type basalt into my search terms. When I click add, it is looking at the thesaurus to say, do I find this term only once or do I find it multiple times? It found more than one descriptor. So it gives me the opportunity now to review the results. When I click yes here, you'll see that it has opened the Thesaurus Manager. It's opened its own because I've taken this path through the attribute assistant. And it has opened it with this find label search. And so now I have the same steps that I had before. I'll select this one. I'm going to locate this concept just because I want to be extra sure that it's coming from the right place in the thesaurus. And it is. This is my igneous rock. This is what I want. And now I will select it. And I've added this term to this object. Back to my set of 64 records. See, I'm cruising along, I haven't had enough coffee or maybe too much, and I decide, oh, I'm going to copy this to all these records. I don't want to link it again. And I copy this to the entire selection. And I've copied basalt to 63 objects. And I'm feeling really good on that, and then I find out, then I realize that, oh, these are not all basalt. We have added this wonderful feature to delete from entire selection. So just some of you haven't upgraded to 2014 yet, or maybe you're new to TMS. So delete from entire selection will take them all off. Of course, you TMS administrators out there will want to think very carefully about who has the permission to add and delete from entire selection. But it is a really fabulous way to get your data entry done very quickly. One workflow you might consider is having staff create object packages for the sets of records that they want tagged and then submitting them to someone central to do that batch entry and manage batch deletes for them. Okay, so that is the basics of the thesaurus and the data entry. Many of you will also be interested in creating your own concept schemes. So I'm going to switch back into the Thesaurus Manager now. All right, in the Thesaurus Manager, get this screen full again. Take this out. All right. On the left, I'm going to fold this back up. These concept schemes that are the folder levels here can be added. In previous versions, those of you who are on previous versions or have worked with them in the past, know that we used to always add our concepts under the authorities folder. This should look familiar to you. There are a couple of things we've added in terms of managing the vocabularies. So under the Add button, I'm going to add a concept scheme. I'm going to call this Materials. So at my museum, we have a lot of materials that may or may not be covered in the Getty Thesaurus. We might want to have our own definitions. While the Getty Thesaurus is a great reference, maybe we want to customize the definitions, the scope notes that we publish to our website. So we're going to make our own concept scheme. This is a local authority, and it's in English. I can add source, scope notes, historical notes. I'm just going to click OK here. Okay, I have a new concept scheme, and when I right-click, most of this is not active. That is because we have also added this really fantastic security in the Thesaurus Manager. So not only can I create different vocabularies organized under concept schemes, but I can manage who has access to add and edit terms, and those people can be different for each one of these concept schemes. So for example, in the ones I had set up previously, the geochronology just has 3 accounts assigned to it. Materials, which I just added, has no one assigned to it. So I'll come in and I'm going to give myself permissions. And maybe I will let my system administrator also. Okay. Now I will have permissions to work with this new concept scheme. I'm going to right-click now, and I want, my museum is bilingual, so I want to add a new preferred label. This is going to be added to this top section, and I'm going to add the French equivalent for materials. So when I choose to add new preferred label, I'm going to put my French equivalent here and choose French from my drop-down. I'm going to check this off as candidate and approved. Okay. So here I have my French equivalent. Now I'm going to add a narrower concept. Adding a narrower concept is going to put vocabulary items below that concept scheme folder. So I'm going to stick sort of with my rock theme. I'm going to add marble. So this is the first one that I've decided to add. I'll say that's been approved. And now within this concept scheme, I have marble. I also want to add a French equivalent for this. So I'll do my preferred label and add this here. Okay, so at this point, maybe I've added some terms or I've just started down this road and I thought, gosh, this is a lot of work. I don't want to have to think about this and think about all the structure. Maybe there are branches of the Getty that I would like to copy and use in my local authority. I want to be able to edit it a little bit, and I want to control who has permissions to edit it. In your TMS database, you'll find that you have access to the art and architecture thesaurus, but you can't edit the entries that are there. So if you want to make those changes, you'll want to copy them down into your own local, locally managed authorities. So I'm going to the art and architecture thesaurus, and I'm going to do another find concept. I'm going to search within that branch, and I am going to search for paintings. because my money is on Getty having a really good structure for paintings. Find my descriptor and locate it in the structure. So at this point, I am going to choose to copy this branch. I see all of this rich information that the Getty has presented for me here. So with the right click over paintings, I'm going to copy this concept. And then when I come down to my materials concept scheme, I'm going to right click, and I have two choices here. I can paste this concept, which will make a copy of this branch of the Getty and just paste it down here. Or I can paste it as a link. I'm going to choose to paste it as a link. And it's going to let me know that this is the concept I'm pasting, and I'm putting it under here, under materials, and I'll say OK to that. And there we are. So notice on the screen now on the left-hand side that in the AAT structure, paintings is blue and it's italicized. Under my materials concept scheme, it is blue. This blue is an indication that the concept is now polyhierarchical. What this means is that it has more than one parent. It belongs to two different parts of the hierarchy. If I had just pasted this concept rather than pasting it as a link, it would not be polyhierarchical. If you decide that you want to sort of borrow from the Getty, you might want to paste it as a polyhierarchical link so that you have that indication of where it began its life, that it came from the Getty. If I wanted to set the preferred broader concept to my materials, then, oh, that's right, it's not local. I can't do it because it's Getty's. If it wasn't from the Getty, I could change it so that this one would have the italics. If I click this, you'll see that I've got all this richness of the Getty's vocabulary now under my local authorities. Okay, another feature that we have, let me fold up this branch just to bring this up on the screen for you. Another feature that we have with the concept schemes is to set for a concept scheme or for a particular branch within it the preferred display language. If I right-click on materials, this is the concept scheme that I added for my own local use, I have the choice here of set display language. I can set my display language for the current concept or for the current branch. I'm going to choose branch, which means that it will change the display language here not only for the concept scheme but for every concept below it. And here I will choose French as my language, and I will click OK. So now you see that in the concept scheme list, the folder has changed to French for its display language, and you'll see that beneath it, the display language, wherever the French equivalent is present for the preferred lexical label, is the one that displays. We'll be talking in the next part of the webinar a lot more about polyhierarchy in the concept schemes that you can move around in this way. We're also next time going to talk a bit more about taxonomy and archives, and we will be adding also the ability for you to import the new version of the Getty's AAT into your thesaurus, as well as adding other thesauri. All right. So why use controlled vocabularies? I'm going to switch very quickly here to a little summary. Let's see. Okay. All right, back to the beginning of our presentation. So the Thesaurus Manager, this is just to summarize what I've presented. This is a browser-based application, and it runs in a traditional desktop window or through a browser. It organizes, structures, and manages the controlled vocabularies that you use in cataloging and retrieval of your collection records. It stores hierarchical, equivalent, and semantic relationships between concepts. It supports polyhierarchical relationships and provides user-defined security on concept schemes for domain specialist vocabulary management. So you might choose to have your curatorial staff manage your materials list. You might have another branch that is specific to Egyptology, and you'll have your Egyptologist in charge of that vocabulary and set the security so that no one else can make changes to it. Why use controlled vocabulary? This is a question that I encounter a lot when I'm doing consulting or training with clients. Controlled vocabularies are used across knowledge organization systems, from libraries, where we get a lot of our inspiration in museums, from libraries and museums to biological taxonomies and the semantic web. They're a means to organize information for efficient use and retrieval. Controlled vocabularies are developed by subject matter specialists with purposeful identification of preferred and alternative lexical labels. They promote consistency in cataloging and provide enhanced end-user access to collection information. By using controlled vocabularies, you really get that consistency in your cataloging. When you have free text fields and roles for data entry, you are not going to get the same consistency. You're going to get human data entry, which can use a little help from controlled vocabularies. So use cases, cataloging and retrieval of information. I can't emphasize that enough. Consistent use of standard terminology that's been determined by your subject matter experts. The management of multiple vocabularies or concept schemes by your subject matter specialist. Rapid data entry of standard concepts for collection cataloging, and a logical organization of concepts that ensures that your domain expertise is both well-defined and well-maintained. Okay. So I think I'll turn it back over to Danielle for some questions.
Okay, thank you, Jeri. I do have a couple of questions and just a few additional things to add. So, Jeri, do you want to bring the thesaurus up again and just put that on your screen?
Okay.
So one thing I wanted to point out is just the use of nomenclature here, which might be a little unfamiliar to some. Things like concept scheme, lexical label. I mean, these, we're used to words like term and
Yes.
term type, but where does words like preferred label, preferred lexical label, and concept scheme come from? It does actually have a source. We looked around for accepted international standards on thesaurus terminology because whenever possible, we want to find standards and make sure that TMS is compliant with them. And up until a few years ago, there was not a standard for thesaurus terminology, but subsequently one came into existence and is becoming more and more widely adopted. And that's the SKOS reference system. SKOS, S-K-O-S, stands for Simple Knowledge Organization System. It's a particular international standard. So we relied on the SKOS nomenclature in the new thesaurus, and that's why we're using phrases like preferred lexical label instead of what you may have found in earlier incarnations of the TMS thesaurus where we used more sort of colloquial terms. The nice thing about using the SKOS system is that they've also translated these phrases into many languages, and it's, you know, we don't have to try to figure out, you know, how would we say this in German, and is the way we say it necessarily the way somebody in Germany would say it. So So that's why we rely on these phrases that you just need to get used to. So that was one thing I wanted to point out. Now, someone asked a question about the medium field because, Jeri, you used that as an example, and it's interesting that that elicited a question because right before the webinar, Jeri and I were discussing the medium field. Do you want to show TMS for a second?
Right, yes.
The object record. So you can see that there's a medium field there, and then there's also the attributes down below. And as in many places, you can do things in more than one way in TMS depending on sort of the result that you want to get, how you want to leverage that information, what your desired workflow would be. So you could just type in basalt, as Jeri showed, and then through this very clever back-end process, TMS will find the phrase basalt in the thesaurus, and then in one of the basalt terms, it will have the definition that it's a type of rock, and so that, and to follow Jeri's example, when she searched for rock in narrower terms, she found basalt, even though basalt doesn't have the word rock in it. But the way you can get mislaid there is because rock is also, let's say, I'm just making this up, but let's say it's a type of music, rock music. Well, we do have the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and we have Hard Rock Cafe. They're both clients that use TMS. And so for them, they're going to, if they type in the word rock and end up with basalt, that's not going to be what they want. They want, the genres of music. So there's a downside to the ease with which you can just type in here. My own preference, and this is just mine, Jeri may debate me on this, is that I prefer to drop down below and use the attributes for my medium where you can actually specify exactly the medium, the attribute that you want, where in the thesaurus it comes from, and you have a little bit more rigidity. That's probably from my librarian background where authority control was, the be-all and end-all for me as a librarian. So either way is acceptable. Either way has its pros and cons. We offer you two options, and that's why you see both here.
Right. I like a little bit of a combined approach to this. I prefer both. I prefer having the attributes for the materials and that real control over the data entry, but then using the medium field as an output, what you want to display on your labels and website for the caption for the object, which in many cases can be published out just based on the terms that you have linked, but sometimes you need a phrasing that doesn't really come directly from just the list of terms that have been linked. Mm-hmm. So I like both. There is also, related to this topic, in many of our data entry fields, there is a what we call Thesaurus assisted data entry, where on my keyboard, my mouse was in the medium field, and on my keyboard I chose Control and Insert, and that opened my thesaurus. And so I could search for something here. Let's say I wanted to search this. And when I select it, it pastes it into the field. So that's also, something to think about. It does ensure that the data entry is the preferred terminology, and you can configure this so that it looks only at one branch or one concept scheme for that control insert rather than presenting the entire thesaurus, but it also relies on human beings doing that. So I still prefer attribute control over that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also just to say one more thing about this is that if you use the control insert, as Jeri just demonstrated, you kind of get, in some ways, the best of both worlds because you have access to the thesaurus and you can pick a term that actually exists and is approved and the term that you want to use in the thesaurus, but you can also then modify it. So I call that loosely controlled vocabulary. So I could pick the term basalt here, but then I could continue to type and say basalt with little flakes of yellowish gold. That would be harder to describe if I just used the attributes control down below. Another question that, just speaking of the attributes control in the lower left-hand part of the screen, there is a configuration setting in TMS that determines whether this attribute control in the lower left-hand corner shows up here very prominently on the front card, or shows up in this slightly more hidden place on the other tab that Jeri is showing right now. So she has set her configuration, and it's the configuration that I greatly prefer, to show the attributes on the front card. So if you are looking right now at your own TMS and not seeing in the lower left-hand corner the attributes, it's because there's a database configuration setting that's very, very easy to change. That's system-wide, so it's not just for a particular user, it will be for all of your users, and it makes the attribute control show up on the front card of the objects module. Let me just look at some of the other terms. So, or other questions. So, one person is asking whether we are demonstrating TMS 2014 or TMS 2016. Yes. That's a good question.
This is 2014. Yes, this is 2014, and there, I would never say none, but I can't think of any changes in the thesaurus for 2016, so it's essentially the same as the 2016 thesaurus. Mm-hmm. But this one is 2014.
Right. Someone else is asking if they upgrade from TMS 2012 to TMS 2014, will this affect the local authority structure?
No, it will not. Your data will migrate. In fact, this is a database that was upgraded from 2012 to 2014. And I've added some concept schemes since then, but under authorities, I still have my attributes, and then down in my objects list, I have some local authorities that were added when this database was in 2012. And all of this data is still here. It's all still linked to the object records and all in good shape.
Mm-hmm. There is one caveat, though, that will be part of the next presentation, which has to do with levels. If you have used levels in an earlier incarnation of the Thesaurus Manager, they're handled in a slightly different way in the new Thesaurus Manager, and when you upgrade, you'll receive instructions about how to deal with that. So it's not difficult, but that's the only thing that might take some manual intervention, is just to make sure that your levels are being done in the new way. If you've levels are things like species, genus, family, or in the case of archives, series, subseries, box folder. Those are all levels. So again, that could be a whole webinar in and of itself, and it's an interesting topic that we would like to talk about, but that would take, it would take a lot more time than we can give in this webinar. But we will discuss it. A couple of questions about the version of the AAT. So when will the new version, because the AAT is constantly being renewed, they put out a new version every year or 6 months, I think. It's more often than a year. So if someone wants to upgrade to the new version of AAT, how is that handled? Or do you want me to answer that, Jeri?
You can answer that.
Yeah. So the version of the AAT that a lot of TMS users have is kind of one that's getting old at this point, and we are going to be making the new version of the AAT available soon as within the next 3 to 6 months. But as Jeri could show you in the upper left-hand corner there where it says Add, we've already built in the functionality to import a new concept scheme, which means essentially to import your own thesauri. So this functionality is what's going to be used to import a new version of the AAT or other structured vocabularies. It doesn't have to be the AAT. It could be anything. It could be Chenal's nomenclature or some local specific to your subject domain control vocabulary. So this import concept scheme is a very useful feature that is built into the Thesaurus Manager now, but we will not be able to actually let you run with it until we finish structuring the data and release it, which, like I said, would be within the next 3 to 6 months. We're also going to be providing scripts so that you can link up your old use of the AAT with the new AAT. So if there was the old term was painter and the new term is still painter, you don't have to have terms linked in both places. These scripts that we're going to provide you with will allow you to collapse those into the new AAT. So I hope that answers that question. Let me see. Sort of similar thing with the TGN, the source of geographic names. That is due for an upgrading, and the same functionality will allow you to do that. Somebody's asking if there is a help manual specifically for the thesaurus.
There is not yet, but there will be later this fall.
Just looking through the other questions. Someone is asking sort of a follow-on question about what type of concept schemes or structured taxonomies can be imported, and we will be providing documentation that will tell you the structure that the Thesaurus Manager is expecting in that add concept scheme functionality. So if you have other data that you can put into a structure that the Thesaurus Manager can import, you'll just follow the guidelines and you'll be able to do that. It's an XML document, incidentally. Somebody else is asking about the structure, and as you can imagine, it lends itself to being XML because that can show the taxonomy hierarchically very, very nicely. I think, let's see. Oh, well, this is, yeah, let me just answer one more question because I actually did demonstrate this once at Collective Imagination at our annual conference. So someone is asking for the best way to find a concept like Paris, the geographic place, where there's many cities named Paris. There's a Paris, Illinois, there's a Paris, Texas, Paris, France, and you just want the Paris, France. So, Jeri, do you want to demonstrate that?
Right. So I'm going to start within geography because I know that I'm looking for a place and not plaster of Paris. And in my results, I found 39 descriptors in TGN, descriptors and alternate terms. I can sort my results by path. And then in my path, I can come and find this Paris in France. Another thing that I might do for a place like Paris is to search first for France and locate that concept, and then search within that branch. So that's going to get me far fewer results. And if I locate this one, that's probably your best shortcut. Some of you know me, know that I am an anti-scroller. Don't like to scroll anything that can get me away from scrolling. I'm all for. And if I search within France for Paris, then I get a much shorter result list. And I see this one is my descriptor.
Mm-hmm. Right, so that's how I do it also. I think we're going to stop just because we're almost up to the 1 hour mark, and we are going to have a follow-on presentation on October 21st. So get your questions together and by all means send them in advance. And this is a chance, because we're splitting it into two parts, that you can actually ask questions before the presentation instead of during it. I also want to point out, while you have your calendars open, that we're going to be giving a webinar on crystal reports tips, and that's going to be Wednesday, September 23rd at the same time of day as this one is. So this one, Wednesday, September 23rd, and the next part 2 of Thesaurus Manager on Wednesday, October 21st. So thank you, Jeri, for giving the presentation. Thank you, everyone who asked questions, and I look forward to seeing you all at our next webinar.